Tallboys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear. Miracle Works Detailing. No cars too dirty. And by Cycle Mart, your motorcycle parts store.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to episode 69 of Tallboys
and Trackmasters.
No innuendos meant, right?
No, not here. This is a PC workplace.
If you say so. Well, my friend, it's getting to be that time of the year. We're under 50 degrees. It's raining. It's dark.
Stuff's starting to wind down. You know, leaves are dropping. The clippings
are in the ground and on the road
sides. Tell you what, it's probably my least favorite terrain to ride on is trail that's got a lot of wet leaves on it. It's more unpredictable than mud and spend a lot of time on the ground.
Yeah, unfortunately, I start seeing coming to an end, and sad part of the year for us.
Unfortunately, it was cut short for me. I've been fortunate enough to get we took the little Trail 90 down to the in-laws and cut a little single track in, and of course Shiloh rode it, and her brothers rode it, and everybody had a good time. So
a little bit more riding.
It was good to get back on something with two wheels and an engine. We went and did a little mountain biking on the honeymoon, but it was nice to have something with a throttle.
Yep. Well, that's going to kind of lead us into a new series and segment that we're going to do here on the show, and that's what we're affectionately referring to as our Shootout Series. So Shootout Series is going to be a comprehensive and in-depth review of dual sport and adventure motorcycles in a particular segment. And we hope that we can provide you all with information and insight to help you make a buying decision, or maybe you'll learn something about a bike that you already have. So I think we'd be remiss to not start this series off with what is probably the longest running segment in this class, and that is the Japanese 650s. So if you are out there and you're looking for a robust, reliable, dead cheap, and there's so much stuff out there for this class in this segment, and the single cylinder thumper Japanese 650 class is definitely one to start with.
In an age of fuel injected, somewhat complicated in some cases, cross plane parallel twins and stuff like that, simplicity's sake, at least these Japanese 650s really still shine. There's a reason why they haven't been updated beyond just emissions, but
yeah, they kind of help. Let's be frank, like kind of started the whole dual sport and adventure bike segment for the most part.
It's a testament to how great these three bikes that we're going to discuss are when you will find virtually any especially adventure-oriented dual sport, are weighed against the Japanese 650s. They're ubiquitous. That's the sledgehammer reliability, the simplicity, the affordability. Like, these bikes can be found for relatively good prices, used even to this day, and because they've been so unchanged for so long. For instance, a 1997 XR650L is going to get you the same equipment that a 2024 will. So
yeah, I think that is a very interesting point, that You just don't see that in any type of automotive manufacturing these days, where
No.
something comes out that long ago and just completely remains unchanged. You don't see that with vehicles or anything of that nature. I think that motorcycle people are the only ones that are kind of like, yeah, that's good enough. It was good enough back then. It's still good enough today.
No,
So,
I'm like that with vehicles too. Everybody
well,
else just keeps insisting on more touch screens, bigger
yeah,
touch screens, et cetera, et cetera.
that's a good point.
But you know, 2 out of the 3 of these are still carbureted
Yeah,
in 2024. So that's really that's really something.
it really is. So, obviously, the models that we're talking about are Honda's XR650L, Suzuki's DR650, and Kawasaki's KLR 650. So I asked on our Facebook group if you guys had some of these bikes to submit some pictures of what you had, and we got some good feedback on that. There was a couple other ones I didn't get a chance to add to, and I'm sorry about that, guys. But we'll roll down through here real quick. There's Mom's KLR 650 first gen.
Yep.
Tyler Vincent on his DR 650.
I've been told that that thing is overpriced.
It is a little overpriced
Yeah.
sometimes. Craig Cunningham DR 650. Marcus Yonkers DR 650. Evelyn Sullivan and a really awesome action
That
shot
is
of
a
her DR
sweet
650.
picture.
We have Andy Gorman and his XR 650L. Alan Snyder's XR 650L, which is a sharp looking bike.
I saw that one in person.
Yeah.
Alan's the guy that I bought the Trail 90
Yeah.
off of, and that thing's a very sweet machine.
Yeah, it is. Looks set up really well.
Yeah.
And last, certainly not least, my dad's XR 650L, which I think that was at the third year, the 3 or 4 detour there.
Yep.
And a similar build to Alan's there as well. So I think whenever you're doing a comparison, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Obviously, everybody's going to have their own opinions, and I wanted to lead with that because obviously there's going to be people out there that disagree with what we have to say, but hopefully you guys take something away from this, and we can kind of peel the onion back a little bit, piece by piece,
Yep.
and get into the nitty gritty on these things.
Our opinions about these machines are worth exactly as much as you guys paid for them.
0.
Yeah.
Free. So let's start out with a brief history of the 3 of these motorcycles, and we'll start with the XR. So 1990 rolls around. Honda's kind of in the market to make some of their bigger 4-stroke motorcycles street legal in the United States. Now, that's a very good preface. I should point to this is in the U.S.
Yep.
There's a lot of these motorcycles are already available overseas in different specifications or different trim levels, but we're talking about here in the U.S. So, Honda been around forever, kind of kicked the door down and started the whole off-road 4-stroke segment when everybody else was still doing 2 strokes.
Yep.
And
that's really interesting because reading back through Honda's history, they were very pro 4-stroke. Like during the development of like the Trail 90 and stuff like that, they were convinced that the 4-stroke was the way to go. And then they came out with the Elsinore 2-stroke, which completely shocked the 2-stroke market. I know in the Hodaka history book I have, it talks about the introduction of the Elsinore and how it, really reshaped the 2-stroke market and everything. And then Honda came back to redefine what a 4-stroke bike could be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was really, really interesting to kind of flip flop between the 2 engine architectures.
Yeah. So Honda, obviously, as the years progressed from the late 70s into the mid 80s, they kept seeing the CCs increase of the bigger 4-stroke bikes. The 250s, the 350s, the 500s, and then 83, 82, 83 comes around. They kind of roll out the XL 600R, which was a street and trail version of their big bore 600cc engine. That slowly morphed into the off-road oriented XR 600R, which is a huge success and has a very awesome and long storied pedigree of success.
Big cult following to this day.
Yeah.
It's still a pretty sought after machine, despite having a rear drum brake.
Well, the 600R actually was disc brake starting in 91, I believe it was. But yeah, Scott Summers, name synonymous with Honda and
very, very
racing.
iconic. The guy,
holding one of them
holding that machine. What a man.
Yeah. So Honda decided, we need to kind of get back into making a viable big bore thumper street legal machine. Overseas, they had the Honda NX 650 Dominator.
Yep.
They took a good bit of the components from that machine and combined it with the chassis from the XR 600R. And lo and behold, 1992 sold as the 93 model year XR 650L. As you can see, typical 90s styling. We've got lots of clashing retro style colors.
Not clashing, it's beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I mean, it's so good that Honda came back full circle to it with the red, white, and the blue motif and everything.
So there's a 93 model, and guess what? There's a 2024. Other than bold new graphics, this thing has not changed since 1993.
Yeah, B&G and black wheels.
I do like the 24s. I think they
I
look
do
the best.
too. I've been, I guess, non-seriously considering one for some time now.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Suzuki's venerable DR650. So this thing kind of started out similar the same way. Suzuki was kind of dabbling in the bigger four strokes in the race bikes. The SPs come to mind, SP 500s, and they kind of morphed and came about 1985 with the Suzuki DR600. Drum brake rear, kickstart only, big street legal motorcycle, and it was successful. It was successful in its own right, along with the DR350, which we've talked about, kind of kicked off the dual sport segment in itself. I mean, it was marketed as a dual purpose machine. So that bike remains relatively unchanged up until 1991, when the second generation of it came out, and it was actually a DR650 SE. This kind of bridged the gap between the current model and that first generation. They kind of took a little bit of everything from both and put into this one. These are kind of oddball. You didn't really see a whole lot of these. I don't really see a whole lot pop up for sale anymore. I just don't think that they were exactly what people were looking for at that time. And the Honda really did outsell this the Suzuki in leaps and bounds, along with the third bike that we're going to talk about here shortly.
Agreed.
But lo and behold, come 1996, Suzuki comes out with the current generation DR650 SE. This bike is the same as it is right there in 1996, save for a little bit of updates. They had some trouble with the base gaskets on the 1996 models, leaking oil. But yeah, and then there you go. There's the current generation right over top of our faces.
Very cool.
Yeah, that on there. But
very cool effect.
yeah, same
So,
bike, man.
1996 model. So that's almost older than I am.
Yeah.
I was born in 95.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
that's amazing that a machine can remain unchanged for almost
it's over 30
30
years.
years. This is kind of an aside. The longest running unchanged machine that I can think of in street and trail history would be the TW200.
Yeah.
Introduced in like 1987. The
Yeah.
only real change was going from a standard round slide carb to a CV carb, and going from a front drum to a front disc, both of which happened in 2001.
Yeah.
So
that's minuscule changes in the grand scheme of things.
oh yeah, it's genuinely amazing that something can remain unchanged for that long.
Well, we've said it on the show before, there's three things that are inevitable: death, taxes, and these Japanese 650s.
Yep.
So last and certainly not least, the KLR 650. So this is a 1987 or 86, but it's 87 model year. It kind of came about the same way as the DR. Kawasaki had the KL 600E, which was a kickstart only model. Engine very similar to this. Now, the main thing you got to remember on this bike as well is it was liquid cooled. So that was a revolutionary thing back in the early 80s. And it's the only one of the three that continues to remain liquid
I
cooled.
think it was one of the first liquid cooled street and trail bikes,
Yes.
period, or maybe the first. I'm not entirely sure, but that does stand out in memory.
Yeah. So this is what the KLR lovers, refer to as the first gen. It ran from 1986 all the way up until 2007. 2008 model year, it got a refresh. It got heavier, but it also got a little more comfier. A lot of the noise, vibration, and harshness features were added to this. A filled swing arm, rubber mounted foot pegs, just a little bit more creature comforts on this model. And it had one of the best integrated rear racks of any stock motorcycle that in our class ever made, and people still rave about how well made that rear rack is and integrated into the subframe. And then, 2008 to 2018, and then it dies. It goes away. Goes the
I
way of the Dodo Bird
I
for a couple
remember when
years.
that happened. Yep.
And people were kinda sad about it, honestly. They thought it should still be around. There was so much rumor and speculation about, Yamaha coming out with the T7 around that same time. It's Kawasaki killing the KLR to come out with something comparable and can fight that same class. And there was a lot of renderings and kind of spy photos,
Yep.
a Versus 650 kind of style bike with bigger suspension, brakes, what have you. And then it came back out in 2021 and really, for the most part, didn't really change a whole lot from the second gens, other than it got even heavier and it got fuel injection.
Yep.
So this thing now meets all the emissions requirements for the strict places over in Europe and Australia. So it's able to be sold worldwide again. And I think that's a key thing to remember is, especially here in the United States, we're the only country where you can get all three of these motorcycles currently.
Yep.
You can't get the DR650 overseas anymore. You can't get the XR anymore.
Man, it is especially unfortunate for Australia, for instance. The DR650 was such an iconic machine for just vast expanses of undeveloped bush and stuff like that over there. You had the bush pig.
Yep.
DR650 with an oversized gas tank. You have plenty of range. You just go adventure, and it's. I mean, it's a sign of the times. It's unfortunate nonetheless.
Yeah.
Another point, something that I've thought about in the past is the introduction of the KLR 650 kind of started the adventure bike idea
Yes.
for regular people. I know the BMW R80 GS is largely lauded as being the first, adventure bike and this, that, and the other, but the KLR 650 was marketed towards, regular working class people for the most part.
Yeah.
It
People
was-
that didn't have a whole lot of money and knew how to do basic motorcycle maintenance and
Yep.
weren't intimidated by a boxer engine or anything like that.
Yep. It's so largely unchanged that one of the biggest perceived issues of the KLR 650 being the doohickey,
Mhm.
which is part of that's like a tensioner for the counterbalance system, from
Yeah.
what I understand. The newest KLR that you could go buy still has it. Still has the same flaw that's been present for who knows how long.
Over 30 years now. Almost. We're
Yeah.
going on 40 years on that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel old yet?
That's older than me.
Yeah.
It's 1 year older than I am. I'm 34. That's insane. All right. So that kind of gives you a general overview of the history of the three machines. And up next, we're going to go through the spec sheet. Mr. Trevor, I'll leave the floor to you, my friend. You were the one that put this together. I'll just kind of hang back and add some commentary here with this.
All right. So, again, take these with a grain of salt. As well as I do, that when you're trying to spec out like the weight of a bike, every site seems to have a little bit different interpretation of what wet and dry weight means. That goes for both these specs. So this is a compilation of what I think are some of the most important factors that I consider when I'm looking into a bike. So the Honda XR 650L, for instance, comes in at the lightest weight of 346 pounds wet. So wet to me would mean full tank of gas, ready to ride, oil, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Some manufacturers really seem to try to bend what wet weight means.
Yeah. Half a tank of gas, quarter tank of gas. Yeah.
Yeah, like bare minimum filled oil
Yeah.
and all this other stuff. So I'll come out and say it. The XR has the best suspension out of the options. Front suspension 11.6 inches travel out of a 43 millimeter fork. Rear suspension 11 inches. Fuel capacity comes in at the lowest out of any of these bikes at 2.8 gallons. However, there are aftermarket options.
Yeah.
Front wheel 21 and rear 18, which is probably my favorite feature out of this bike.
Yeah, we'll definitely going to get into that. Yeah, that's tire options and other things are a very big part of what you're trying to do with these bikes. So
Yes.
yeah, having an 18 is a huge advantage.
Yep, I agree. Ground clearance is class leading at 13 inches, but that comes at the cost of a 37-inch seat height, which for
It's
somebody that's relatively long leg like me wouldn't be much of an issue. But for shorter riders, 37 inches is a pretty tall seat. 34 horsepower, 31.4 pound-feet of torque,
Gets the job
according
done.
to what we can get a hold of.
Yeah.
I think that's plenty, but there's we're in the age of 270-degree offset parallel twins that can lift the front wheel at 70 miles an hour and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, it depends on what you're wanting to do with a bike, which is again what we'll get into. Each of these three bikes is good at a specific kind of niche in the market. So on to the biggest and heaviest out of the group, the Kawasaki KLR 650. The previous generations come in at about 416 pounds. The most current generation, like we talked about, became heavier due to fuel injection, ABS, emission systems, etc. Is about 461 pounds.
Wow.
So, I hear all the time. It's like, it doesn't feel that heavy. It's like, I bet it doesn't when it's moving, but you try to pick up a 460-pound bike, it's going to feel like every pound of it. The suspension on the KLR 650 is probably the most limited out of this group of bikes. 7.9 inches of travel out of a 41 millimeter fork. I don't recall if that 41 millimeters is for the most current gen or previous gens, but
I think
know
it's all that they're all pretty much 41 mil.
the front suspension on KLR seems to be especially spindly, to the extent that a like fork brace that sits slightly above the wheel is almost a necessity.
It makes a big difference on those.
Yeah. Rear suspension travels 8 inches, again, kind of lagging the class, but we'll get into what niche this bike is meant to fill. Fuel capacities, class leading at 6.1 gallons out of a factory tank.
And they make oversized tanks for those, which just blows my mind.
which it probably holds more gas than my Tacoma at that point. So front wheel 21, that's good. We like that. Rear wheels is 17, which, like James said, we'll get into about somewhat limited tire options. Clearance is bottom of the class at 8.3 inches. However, that gets you a 34.3-inch seat height, which is
3 inches lower than the Honda.
Especially for an adventure-oriented bike that you're not planning on doing much log hopping or whoops or anything. Giving up that clearance in exchange for a low seat height, makes sense. 40 horsepower and almost 40 pound-feet of torque.
Good deal.
So that's really the big benefit of these Japanese 650s from a power plant standpoint is just the torque. Everybody's obsessed with horsepower, but torque plays a huge role in your ability to lug an engine. For instance, it's great to not have to gear hunt constantly on trails. You can be a gear high or whatever and just get on the throttle, and that engine just continues to spin up. And
the tractor factor is super high on all three of these bikes.
So last but not least is the Suzuki DR650, coming in at approximately 366 pounds, which they did lighten it between the previous and most current generation, like you talked about. Front suspensions, 10.2 inches with a 43 millimeter fork. Rear suspension is 10.2 inches. Pretty good. Fuel capacity out of the factory tank's 3.4 gallons, but man, just like James said with the KLR, there's so many options with aftermarket tanks. It's the options for aftermarket tanks for carbureted bikes are about as far as you can imagine. Unfortunately, fuel injection, it kind of changes things up a little bit. Your options become a little less. I know and in my instance, when I was wanting to throw an oversized tank on my KTM 350, following running out of gas and, our Richwood experience and everything,
Whatever gets you to Richwood.
was IMS was pretty much the only option for me because I wanted the wings so I could get the weight of fuel forward and low. I'm not a fan of the tanks that advertise an additional gallon and then they just bring the
Yeah.
top of the tank up
The
to
old nut buster.
nut buster. Yeah. I'm a tank
For the
bag.
men folk out there.
Yeah, I'm a tank bag guy too.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes away your ability to run a tank bag with a really big fill neck or whatever on your tank. So again, like the KLR, come in with a 21-inch front wheel and a 17-inch rear,
Mhm.
and I can attest from helping Tom King change the rear on his DR650. There is something about the geometry of the rear wheel on that bike that makes it especially difficult to
Yeah.
spoon a tire onto.
Yeah, I think people don't really understand that. The smaller the rim, the harder the tire is to change.
Yep.
The bigger it is, the easier it is to change. Just the simple physics there.
So ground clearance is decent, 10.4 inches. 34.8 inch seat height, which when you compare
So
that
low.
to the 34.3 inch seat height of the KLR, you're gaining, an additional 2 inches of ground clearance at the same seat height,
Yeah.
which,
It's a big deal.
we'll get into, what bike fills what role.
Yeah.
But that'll play a role in that. So 36 horsepower and 32.2 pound-feet of torque. All these torque and horsepower specs are for uncorked engines.
Mhm.
Everyone knows that, especially on carbureted machines, there's performance to be had for pretty reasonable prices.
Yep.
All these bikes are jetted ridiculously lean. In the case of the KLR 650, the most current generation being fuel injected, the injection system and everything is also lean.
Yep.
So, it would benefit from just a simple piggyback fuel controller, just the same as one of these other bikes would benefit from a jet kit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we'll definitely roll into that here with some mods in the
Yeah.
future. So yeah, thanks, man. That was great. And if I'm not mistaken, all three of these motorcycles are 5-speed transmissions too. Right?
yep, I
Okay.
believe so.
So that's another thing to think about whenever you're looking at these.
But a 5-speed transmission where the gears are usable.
Right. Not so short
Versus
ratio.
the
and-
DRZ 400,
Yeah.
which is a little bit more limited in
I have a piggyback question I want to add to that as well.
Sure.
So, last episode we talked in industry news about Suzuki is coming out with a new DRZ 400 that's going to be fuel injected.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw. I think Tyler Vince or somebody shared it, but Polysport had a new restyle plastic kit for the current gen DRZ 400s. And we were talking on there back and forth. I remember when Polysport came out with the restyle kits for the YZ252 strokes.
Yep.
Well,
and the KXs.
Yeah.
And,
well, a year and a half later, the brand new Yamaha 2-strokes, guess what? They had that same style plastic. So I think that was a very early rendition of what the new DRZ is going to look like. But having said that, do you think Suzuki doing this with the DRZ 400 also opens the door for them to do the same with the DR650?
I would say that considering Kawasaki took a look at things and determined the only way to continue the legacy of the KLR was to move towards fuel injection. The DRZ 400 is moving, I guess, supposedly, or on good authority. Anyway, if in the event that it moves towards fuel injection, which it looks like it's heading that way,
Mhm.
um, considering that the DR650 is locked out of a lot of what are they on now? Euro 4,
Mhm.
5, whatever emissions
Yeah.
based markets, especially Australia. I would imagine that relatively soon we're going to see a fuel injected DR 650.
I agree with that.
I think that's only a natural progression of things.
Yep. Good deal. So that's going to move to our next topic of conversation, which is philosophy of use.
Yep.
So I think that it doesn't matter what kind of thing you're going to buy. You are way better off to do your research and figure out how does that fit what you're looking for.
Yeah.
What is your philosophy of use of what you're intending to buy it for? If you can buy something that fits your needs right out of the box, you're going to be way better off, in my opinion. There's going to be less time making it how you want, less money making it how you want, and it's just going to be an overall more enjoyable experience straight out of the box. So I think we really need to touch on this. Obviously there's preconceived notions about each of these motorcycles, and I think it's definitely warranted. So let's just break it down. The XR 650L is intended and more drawn towards the more off-road oriented people that want to buy this bike.
It's a big dirt bike.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of the whole theme between the high seat height, the long travel suspension, the high clearance. It is intended as a big dirt bike.
Yep. The DR 650 kind of skirts the street side a little bit and the off-road side. If you are a person that's kind of wanting to do everything, maybe not well, but good enough, I think the DR kind of fits that. And on that same side, it's definitely more for shorter riders.
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
And then I think we can all kind of agree that the KLR 650 definitely is on the street end of the spectrum of those 650
And
bikes.
that's not to say that you can't take, for instance, a KLR 650 and whip it around single track. I've watched Nick Hall ride.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the good thing I think about every one of these bikes. And they've been around so long, like you said earlier, that there's so many different aftermarket options. You can make these anything you want them to. Take for instance, my dad's XR. All the stuff he's put on it and done to it, like I've rode it a lot. I don't have any problem taking that on a long highway jaunt. It's comfy. You just mentioned Nick. I've seen him take that thing on some horrible, ridiculous single track at Hatfield McCoy's, where that bike has no business being, and he's doing like it's nothing.
I've seen that thing crest some hill climbs with the front tire like 4 feet off the ground, and it was built out to be a pretty capable machine.
And I've seen the DR 650s do both extremely well.
I have. So my kind of little thought is, if you would take an XR and a KLR and add them together and then divide by 2, you would arrive at a DR 650.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I think you're right. But yeah, I think if you go in looking to buy one of these bikes and right off the bat, hey, I'm going to do a lot more off-road than I am street stuff.
Yep.
I would say buy the XR. I mean, it's going to take less stuff for you to get ready to go and do what you want to do as compared to everything else.
Now, I will say for the XR, if you're one of the guys, it's like, I'm gonna do a pannier system, rear rack, this, that, the other. The subframes on the XRs are probably the weakest out of the 3 options.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to break where the subframe tube meets the main frame of the bike. So there's just a lot of leverage right there.
Yep.
But I beefed up the subframe of my KLX 650, or sorry, KLX 250. That is somehow the only bike that lands me in the hospital. But if you're not afraid to break out the tube bender, the welder, etc., you could turn the XR 650L into a pannier capable touring machine or something like that.
Absolutely.
Like you said, you can make any bike do pretty much anything. It's just a matter of what amount of effort do you want to go through, and are you a guy that wants to tinker or a guy that wants to get out and ride?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like we said, I really think that each one of these motorcycles can do anything that you want, and the amount of options out there are probably the most out of any brand or manufacturer that you can think of. And there's guys that take their 650Ls around the world. There's guys that take the DR around the world. And one thing that I think is really interesting, I was talking to my dad about this before we came on the show, is all three of these bikes just work so well together in a group, especially if you're riding together.
Yeah.
So you don't see any kind of, you know, brand rivalry or, them putting each other down or anything like that.
No.
These guys are all about getting together, going and ride, and they just complement each other so well if you're out there, You got a group, obviously, the XR is going to do really good off road, just bone stock anyway.
Yep.
But they can still keep up on the street with everybody else. The DR is good at, both things, and then the KLR is obviously going to shine on the street, but it might struggle a little bit off road. But
Yep.
like we said, dude, you can build these things to do anything you want.
Well, it depends on what your definition of off road is.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of people, off road is just basic, like backside of Valley Falls type
Yeah.
terrain. Any of these bikes is very well suited, including the KLR,
Mhm.
to something like that. None of these bikes will excel at single track. The XR would probably be the closest to excelling at single track,
Yep.
but you'd have to already be a pretty competent rider, and have some experience on throwing around like lighter weight bikes to really make a 346-pound bike work.
Yeah.
Going through single track, for instance.
One thing of this philosophy of use that I would say as well is I think the Kawasaki and the KLR has a little bit of an advantage in this segment here because they offer several different variations of the same bike.
Yeah.
Obviously with the Honda or the DR or the Suzuki, you get what you get. But if you come in buying a Kawasaki and hey, I'm a shorter rider and I really need something that fits me well, they have the S model, which is even lower than the factory one. If you know right out of the gate that you're just going to be doing a lot of touring riding with the thing, you can buy the adventure model that already has the pannier racks and it's the USB ports and all
Yeah.
that type of stuff.
Aux
Aux
lights
ports.
and
Yeah. So Kawasaki in that respect, I think kind of wins that. They have obviously a lot more options, a lot more availability
but that
at the
is
dealership where you don't
that
have to
is
go do that stuff
only
yourself.
that is only because they have revamped the bike, made it fuel injected, and are no longer bound by the whole concept of like grandfathering in
Yeah.
a bike, which is something that needs to be talked about. It's like these bikes are great in their own right, but they're not unchanged because they were so great to start with. In some cases, they're unchanged because there's a grandfather clause within the US EPA regulations
right.
and blah blah blah. And any changes would result in having to essentially undergo emissions testing on current regs. People keep talking about why doesn't Suzuki bring out a 6-speed DRZ 400? It's like because the DRZ 400 5-speed is grandfathered in.
Mhm.
If they come back with a DRZ 400 fuel injected, it's 50 pounds heavier. You guys are going to complain about that too.
Yep.
On the trails, what's worse, a 5-speed transmission or a bike's 50 pounds heavier? It's all a give and take. It's just there's no free lunch, and it's just is what it is.
Well, we've touched on some of these, but we'll reiterate a little bit. We obviously should go through the strengths of each one, and
Yeah.
I think that this is bone stock out of the box. Obviously, the Honda is going to be better for more off road stuff. I think the Honda and the Suzuki being a air cooled machine that's easy to access everything on it
Yep.
makes it a little bit easier to work on.
My goodness, it's just so convenient. I mean, I know I love liquid cooling when I'm out on like a tight technical section, and I hear that little fan come on or whatever. It's like I know an air cooled bike would be quite hot at that
Mhm.
point. They don't call them oil boilers for no reason. But man, I just love the simplicity of air cooled bikes.
Yeah, and that's with the Honda and the Suzuki not having radiators, that's one less thing that if you wreck or drop, you got to
Yep.
worry about crashing and breaking. I mean, I think overall the Honda and the Suzuki are a little tougher when it
Yeah.
comes to that respect.
Yep.
But all three of these things, cost of ownership is probably the biggest thing of all three. It's so cheap to maintain any one of these
Yeah.
machines
If
compared to
you
anything else.
if you are strapped for cash, my biggest recommendation is just get a Japanese
Yeah.
650.
Change the oil when you feel like it. chains and sprockets and brakes, wheel bearings here and there.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that big of a deal to maintain.
The oil change intervals are absolutely fantastic compared to like KTM, for instance. Well, especially compared to a KTM, the cams are hard. And these Japanese 650s, they're producing them the same way that they have for, pretty much
30 years now.
30 years. And
they're tried, they're true, they're reliable. The dealership network is outrageously huge. You're going to be able to find parts if push comes to shove, something happens, and you're out in the boonies and need to find something.
Aftermarket support
Oh,
is
man.
also fantastic.
Probably the best out of any dual sport adventure bike right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. So that's definitely some good strengths on all three of them. Anything else you can think of?
Ease of access. We
Yep.
talk about constantly like this sport aging out or the barriers to entry for young riders, which I experienced. I was pretty familiar with and everything. The existence of a bike that's been around virtually unchanged for 30 years, that allows you to get a lightly ridden model from, well, some of the cases of these guys before you were born, for comparatively pennies, versus going in and paying like, I don't know what an XR 650L goes for now, like $8,000.
$8,000 or so. Yeah, they're all about around that same price, except I think the Kawasaki wins in the price segment.
That is something that needs to be talked about. Not only did Kawasaki manage to come back with this thing fuel injected, we'll just kind of ignore the weight gain or whatever, but the price was absolutely fair. You could get very, very good deals on a brand new KLR 650 fuel injected model for
Romney Cycle Works
quite some time.
Out in the Panhandle had them not long ago for brand new out the door, tax, title, fees, everything. I'm not talking about it's this price and then it's going to be another $2,000 by the time you get out. It was $58.99 out the door for a brand new one. You can't beat that.
Absolutely crazy. We've got something coming down the pike. We'll get a chance to talk to somebody that's got some dealership experience.
Yeah,
is how a bike can even be offered for that cheap in this day and age.
Yeah.
But that's really big strength. Is just I view the Japanese 650s as probably being the single easiest entry point into this hobby.
Exactly, and especially something that's big enough to do a lot of what you want to do.
Heck yeah,
Not
you
struggle.
ride it to work. You're not stuck with just like for my KTM 350, for instance, it's very well set up for enduro style riding for a 4-stroke at least. You will not catch me driving that thing to the corner store to get milk and back.
All right, that's going to bring up the other side of that coin. That's going to be some weaknesses. Obviously, I think the biggest one we've touched on before, and that's KLR's doohickey. So KLRs have a balance shaft that's driven by a chain. It's a chain-driven balance shaft, and they have a auto chain tensioner that's affectionately referred to as the doohickey. And this has been a problem on every generation of KLR. I mean, I know people that have almost 100,000 miles on them and have never had any issues with it, but you do hear about these things lunching the engines because they fail.
There's two types of KLR riders: people that have obsessed over the doohickey and do it right off the bat, or guys that have 100,000 miles on their bike. It is a very weird, kind of dichotomy. I know there's a guy named Eagle Mike that made a name for himself on the KLR forums and stuff for having a solution to this this doohickey, this tensioner. But it was very surprising to me that this was such a well documented problem. And
it wasn't addressed for 3 generations.
Just did not. Even when they did the complete revamp for the fuel injected machines, I mean, how much could it have possibly cost to change, the material that it was stamped from 1/8 to 3/16 or something like that? I mean, it was an odd choice.
Yeah.
But
now the kits to repair this are, I think, $130 I've seen, and it comes with the new doohickey, the gasket for the ignition cover. It's not that big of an involved job, other than you do have to pull the flywheel off.
Yeah.
So if you don't have
It's,
the correct puller, it can be kind of a pain. But
if you like tinkering and wrenching, it's a fun job.
yeah, it's not bad. Couple hours, you're done, and it's a problem you don't have to worry about
Yeah,
anymore.
it's like a 2 beer job.
Yeah, 2 beer job.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. DR 650. Not really a whole lot. I know in '96, like we talked about, they had some issues with the base gaskets leaking, but that's kind of been resolved with the newer models.
The rear wheel bearings
Mhm.
seem to
Yeah, that
wear
is
out relatively
the
quickly.
stock bearings are a little soft.
Yeah.
If you have almost 100,000 miles on them, I know I've heard issues with the third gear main shaft bearing coming apart.
Well, I was with our good friend Tom when that happened. Another thing is, if you put 100,000 miles on your DR, the repeated flexing of the mounting ears for your oil cooler might fail over time. But you're talking about very high mileage in an age where like KTM 500s used up at what 15, 20K.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
done at that point. Yeah, there's not you don't really hear a whole lot about the DR 650 having issues until you get a lot of miles on them. Yeah, maybe the rear wheel bearings here and there. I know that BST carburetor can be a little finicky to work with sometimes, and we'll
Yeah.
get into that on the next segment here with popular mods. But overall, very reliable, very bulletproof bike
Yeah.
and setup. Uh,
I'll let you take this next segment. I want to run to the bathroom.
Go
real
ahead, man.
quick.
So XR 650L weaknesses. One of the big ones that you hear about is the countershaft sprocket, the shaft itself. The spline's wearing out, and there's actually a couple fixes out for that. I know a lot of the guys will use a Honda XR 650R sprocket. It's a lot thicker on the countershaft side. That kind of tends to fix that problem. I know my dad was saying I'd have to look it up. I didn't get a chance to. There's actually a sprocket company out that has a specific sprocket that engages a little bit wider section of the counter shaft and kind of gets rid of that problem. Trevor touched on some of the subframe cracks and issues. I mean, you're going to have that with these big thumper motorcycles. Um, some of the charcoal canister and emission stuff can be a pain on the XR, but we'll get into that here in the next segment with popular mods and what you can do to fix that type of thing. I know the XRs, once they start to get around 15 to 20,000 miles on them, they seem like they like to burn a little bit of oil. So I think your rebuild intervals are a little bit higher on the XR as compared to the DR 650. I know Dad had some issues with that with the bike burning some oil, and he took care of that with a JE high compression piston and top end rebuild, which made that thing really wake up and come to life. But other than your typical wear items on all three of these machines, yeah, they have some issues here and there, but it's not something that really kind of keeps us from wanting to buy and purchase these motorcycles and use them for their intended uses. So, yeah, we're rolling right along here, and not really a whole lot of other weaknesses that I can think of. So, all right, my co-host is back, so we'll get into popular modifications for all three of these machines. Now, let's start with the Honda. Any carbureted motorcycle, like you mentioned, is going to probably need a little bit of help in the fueling department. So a rejet, obviously exhaust to make the thing breathe a little better. Airbox mods, cutting it here and there to make it breathe.
The factory exhaust on the XR is especially hideous.
Yeah,
It's like some weird clamshell design. It's just really, I don't know.
yeah.
Performance aside, it's just ugly.
And so carburetor mod, even up to replacing the carburetor with some kind of flat side FCR. I know I
Yep.
see that done a lot. I've seen them put the CV style factory Honda XR 650R carbs on. That really does wake them up. Just anything you can get to make the motorcycle breathe a lot better. And then if your state allows it, getting rid of the entire charcoal EGR system on the bike with block off plates and
Well,
what have
here in
you.
the free world, that's no problem. I know on carbs that have adjustable pilot screws, for instance, uh, modern bikes have to have a plug on that. So it'll look like you've got kind of the weird zinc pot metal carb body or whatever, you'll have like a little brass plug in uh, your mixture screw or whatever. Drill that out, stick a drywall screw in it, pull that out, and you know, the forums have countless pages of exactly how many turns should twist that out to.
Boy, that's a dying thing in itself right there too, isn't it? The old
The
forum
forums,
days.
man, it just kind of.
So much
I used to
knowledge being
spend so
lost.
much time on like Pirate 4x4. I hate mud, like all
Yeah.
these places, and
Adventure Rider now for our stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and everything, all this knowledge and stuff is kind of just falling to the wayside as people trend more towards like a social media based forum and stuff for their
It's just
information. And
it's like everything else where you're wanting to get that information right now as quick as you can. You
Yeah.
know, everybody's got ADHD now and can't focus.
back in my day, we sifted through 30 pages of a forum post in the hopes that one of them would have relevant information.
I used to love, or I seen a clip from TikTok there, I think it was last week, and it said, when you were following a 42-page forum thread because the guy had the same issue as your vehicle, and then everybody quit using the forum and they never did get the right answer.
Yep. It's sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, on these carbureted bikes, it's a pretty user-friendly process to rejet a carb. People are scared of it. It's been pretty user-friendly in my experience.
Speaking of the forums and the carbs thing, you know, with the Suzuki, there is a sticky thread on Adventure Rider called the BST 40 Bible. And they show you step by step with instructions exactly what you need to do to make that stock DR carburetor work very well.
Yep. Yeah, people are really eager to just completely discard what's on the bike. I'm not saying the engineers are always right about everything, but there's probably more factors than you might have thought of that led to them selecting a specific carburetor for a machine.
Mhm.
Now, the jetting, on the other hand, is largely dictated by emissions.
Yes.
If something like the EPA didn't exist, for instance, all these bikes are run a lot better from the factory.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
Yep. So yeah, the DR kind of benefits from the same things as the XR. Is you get it to breathe better, you know, rejet the carburetor, better exhaust, do away with some of the emission stuff. You know,
You start getting like
airbox and
thumper
pods.
carbs,
Yeah.
and for all these bikes, except the KLR, I suppose, oversized fuel tank
Mhm.
is a popular mod. Which for a carbureted bike, an oversized fuel tank is a very simple mod.
Yeah.
All things considered.
I would say an aftermarket seat is a must for the DR and the XR, especially.
Yes.
It's an awful stock seat.
Yep.
Just get rid of it, bite the bullet, spend the money on a seat
Yep.
concepts or a Sargent or whatever
And
you want.
I was about to say, unfortunately, the price of a seat concept seat has gone up.
Oh my lord! I saw an ad for one for an XR 650L yesterday, and it was the entire seat. It wasn't like, you know, the foam and cover kit, but you know, I remember the entire seats used to be about $220.
Yeah.
It's like $400 now. It's
And
insane.
the time that I was getting in the hobby and slapping seat concepts, I'd get the kit and reuse my factory seat pan. It was like
Yeah.
$180, which even at the time, it's like, man, that's a good bit of money
Yeah.
for a foam and a new cover or whatever. But I laid my KLX down, tore the seat cover, reached out to them. They sent me a new one for $30 or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I was like, this is, you're getting something for your money, which I'm sure you are now. Still, unfortunately, due to the cost of everything else increasing, the price of a seat concepts kit has surpassed $200.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit hard pill to swallow.
Remember a few years back, my wife asked what I wanted for Christmas, and I wanted the C Concepts kit for the XR 650R, and she's like, "Oh, okay." So she ordered it. She's like, "Ah, that was a little bit expensive, but you know, it wasn't horrible." And then it comes, and I open it up. She's like, "Well, that's not a complete seat. Like, no, you have to modify it, make it work on your seat pan." She's like, "Well, I paid this much money. I thought it was getting the whole thing." Like, yeah, no.
Yeah, we don't
But
like to think that, but Harbor Freight sells air staplers for like $20, and
yeah, and my clothes dryer is right beside my garage, so it's
Yep.
easy to throw the cover in there and
Yeah.
get it stretchy and
it's
put on.
it's a fun job.
Yeah, it's not bad.
really.
Not bad. It's satisfying once you know that you're the ones that have done that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
KLR 650, you know, obviously we talked about in the weaknesses. Definitely recommend doing the doohickey mod.
Your limitation of suspension, stuff like that. So,
Yeah, you can
like Cogent Dynamics,
big name in the KLR world.
made their name with KLR components, stuff like that, and a
It
lot of
does help.
KLR guys opt for a fork brace,
Mhm.
which seems to really improve handling and reduce the amount of torsion between the handlebars and the front wheel.
Personal experience, I don't know how much I would throw a lot of money into any of the stock suspension on any of these motorcycles. I think
Yeah.
you get to the point where you're just way better off swapping in something else from a different motorcycle that's a lot better, a lot more adjustable. Um, for the price of doing the Cogent stuff on the KLR, or revalve, rear spring, the ups or the conventional style stuff on the DR, the XR. You could probably find some CRF front forks
It's
or the what have you, whole front end to put on these bikes.
it's really interesting. Yeah, after I got into trail 90s and stuff, there's forum pages absolutely dedicated to guys like doing all kind of oddball like mods to the front suspension and stuff to make it work better. And it's like you're
Yeah.
starting out with like probably the worst front suspension offered
Yeah.
on a bike. Swap in something off like a CR125 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, there's options out there for that.
yeah.
Just depends on how much you want to spend and how
But
much you want to
for
get involved.
the worst suspension that you can imagine, there's people that have dedicated hours of their life to trying to make it perform better.
Exactly. That's probably going to wrap it up here for some popular mods, other than like on the KLR with the new fuel injection, some kind of like, fuel, piggyback fuel programmer to help out a little bit.
Yeah,
would
I
definitely
put that on the same. A JD jet kit's at
Yeah.
over $100 now.
Yeah.
Dobek EJK is like 250, so it's not
same
know,
realm.
it's not completely that far apart.
So firsthand experience, Trevor, I'll let you start. What's been your firsthand experience with all three of these machines?
I've ridden a good bit with our buddy Tom King. If I had to pick one of these bikes, if I could only have one bike in my stable, actually, I'd probably trend towards the DR650. You can set that bike up to lean towards any end of the spectrum for a reasonable amount of money. Now, mind you, it still has its limitations and everything, but that's my take. DR650. I mean, it's just a reliable, straightforward machine. Of course, so is the Honda, but it seems that the Honda really is limited for like more highway use and stuff like that. Unless you take care of the counter shaft sprocket, which I heard you mentioning
Mhm.
as I took a breather, but that's where I stand.
Okay. I'm in a unique position when it
I
comes to
bet
this
I bet you are.
because my father has an XR650L, my sister has a DR650, and my mother has a KLR 650. So I get to see these machines, each and every one of them, on a regular basis. I've ridden all three numerous times, including our good buddy Nick's brand new KLR, the next gen KLR with fuel injection. So I would say, like we've said before, these machines can be built into anything you want them to be. I've taken mom's KLR on single track. I've taken dad's XR on long highway jaunts. I've taken my sister's DR on everything. You cannot go wrong with any of these machines. Um, I would say if you are in the market and you know that you are going to maybe trend towards the off-road side of things, I would probably start looking for an XR or DR, depending on what your height is.
Yep.
But I wouldn't pass up a screaming deal on a KLR either. If you find a good first gen that's kitted out, ready to roll for $1,000 or $1,500 less than you can get the other two, I wouldn't
Yep.
have any qualms about it at all.
That's a really good point. Let's be real. All three of these bikes, we can compare their capabilities off road or single track or this, that, or the other. Compared to a KTM 500, they all kind of suck on
Yeah.
single track.
Yeah.
They're all heavy, limited suspension, etc. The Honda comes out pretty far ahead of the other two. But the place where an XR 650L shines, for instance, is out west, where you
Mhm.
have, long stretches of wide open desert. You really utilize the tractor factor and all that stuff. We don't have that here.
Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, overall thoughts. So you say you would probably lean more towards the DR
I
650.
think so.
So what do you think I'm going to pick? Just knowing me personally.
On the Grom.
On the Grom? No.
Yeah.
I
I
know
think an XR.
you think an
'cause your old-
XR.
yeah, because your
So
old man's so
that
fond
is
of
a
his.
good guess, but that's not actually what I would pick.
Really?
I would pick a KLR.
Really?
I would.
That
I,
surprises me.
I would pick a new KLR 650. I really do think that.
Well, you've had the benefit of throwing a leg over one. I've yet to ride one. I've ridden, an older model, with what I could only assume was a factory carburetor,
Mhm.
factory settings and everything. I was not too thrilled, but
My thought process is this. I'm too big and tall for a DR 650. I don't want to have to spend more money than it takes
yeah,
to make it fit me with lowering pegs. It is what it is. That's not saying anything bad about the bike. I love it. It's just I'm too tall, I'm too big, I'm too lanky for one
yeah.
of those.
That's a really good point. Is all three of these bikes have different ergos.
Mhm.
Of course, the XR is more like the bent leg, um, you know, attack
You're upright on.
style.
Yeah, your
Yeah,
elbows are up, you're ready to go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Versus, on the other end of the spectrum, the KLR is more of a relaxed riding
Mhm.
position. It's still upright, but it's not quite as aggressive as it is on an XR.
Yeah. So, my thought process kind of comes back to I'm too big for the DR. The XR, I don't think the XR offers anything more than what I've already experienced in this realm of riding. Yeah, it's a good bike and it would do everything that I ever needed to do. And if you put a gun to my head and made me sell everything I had and I only had to buy one of these three, it probably would be the 650L. But where I'm at right now, I I would really take a KLR 650, the new gen with the fuel injection. I just feel like that that fuel injected, not having to mess with the carburetor, the choke, or anything like that. Just get on it and go. The styling, the comfort, the availability and options, and the main thing I'm going to come back to is the price. I don't think you can beat that
It's
price.
a sore Peter deal.
Yeah,
It can't be beat.
can't be beat. So at the end of the day, there's something to be said about having 6 grand and being able to walk into a dealership and come home with a brand new
Yeah,
machine
it's like
and knowing that all the miles that are on that bike, you've put those
Yeah.
miles on.
It's like sitting down at the dinner table, you figure out like, okay, I've got 8 grand to set aside for a machine. Would you go with a bone stock Honda 650, a bone stock Suzuki 650, or a bone stock KLR 650, except you still have 1500 plus
Yeah.
to set aside that you can spend on mods. You
Yep.
could do you know,
Tires,
ergonomics,
gear.
tires is the single biggest improvement you can make to a
Mhm.
machine. Aftermarket bars, hand guards, skid plate. That can cover a huge amount of your mod budget and everything. At the end of the day, is what gets you out to enjoy the hobby faster.
Mhm. That's a great point. Yeah. So at wrapping it up on my side anyway. Yeah, I think I would go buy a brand new KLR. Now,
Buy
I,
me one too.
I'll buy you one. Get some more sponsors. You might be able to do that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I would go buy a brand new KLR from the dealership, no problem. It would pain me to go and buy a brand new DR or a brand new XR from the
It would
dealership.
it really would hurt
That's
to
too
go.
much money, and there's
Yeah.
too many of them out there that are already very well set up for
Yep.
half the price.
It would really hurt to stroll into a dealership, pay 8 grand plus for a bike that's been unchanged since,
Yeah.
the mid 90s in
Yeah.
the case of the XR and stuff. It's just
I did a quick little search on Facebook Marketplace. There's 8 or 9 XR 650Ls around here, from 2003 and up that oversized tank, exhaust. They have everything on it you would need it to go for 4,500, $5,000.
You shouldn't have told me that.
You know, that's a no-brainer in my opinion.
Yeah.
What are you gaining by buying the brand new machine? Yeah, maybe it has less miles, but every one of these I've seen have been under 10,000 miles and they're not hurt one bit.
Yep.
So do yourself a favor and buy the used one and save some money. That's my opinion.
I agree. That's my take too. Especially, we talk about the barrier to entry, the aging out of this hobby, etc. Is if you're a newcomer to this hobby, you are going to wipe out. You're going to damage your bike. You're probably going to damage yourself here and there. But it's a lot easier to swallow. Uh, you know, watching a $3,000 bike cartwheel down a hill than it is one that's you paid eight grand for or whatever and put 2 grand of mods in. So
that's great stuff, man. Let's go through some of the comments here because we've got a lot of them, which is great. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. First up, Mr. John Stewart says that poly kit for the DRZ looks great. Yeah, it does, man. It really updates it, makes it look like an RMZ kind of. He also says they can only change the decals so many times before they need the update. Yep. BNG, son, BNG.
Yep. Bold new graphics.
Greg Blakey says the DR650 being in the middle is the best for making you buy more bikes like an addict. You buy one pure dirt bike, at least a more dedicated street bike. Yeah.
That's the approach that we've had is
there's no one do it all
instead of trying to create the unicorn bike, just get two and go to both ends of the spectrum with them.
Yep. Tom King. Hey Tom, thanks for tuning in. He says, yep. TV's Off-Road, which is Tyler Vincent, for those of you who don't know. What's up, buddy? He said, speaking of the backside of Valley Falls, about 45% of it has been filled in with asphalt millings. Ugh. That's not good.
That's disgusting.
Why? How dare they fix things that we like to ride that are rough? Greg Blakey, and he was talking about some of the cons of the DR. He said the neutral sending unit screws on the DR can back out.
That's true, and that's an issue that's been well documented and hasn't been addressed.
It's a DR side stand will rub through the swing arm too. That's not a good thing. I was talking about the front sprockets and the ones that Dad were mentioning there. He said he believes, John Stewart says he believes they come from Italy. And I think you're right. I can't exactly remember the name. We'll look that up. Dad says the extra compression added to the XR also makes the CV card work way better. Yep. Whenever it's got more force pulling her through, that thing did wake that bike up a lot whenever you put that on there.
Nice.
Marcus Yonker says Stark DRC is less comfortable than a 2x4. Yeah, that's just the name of the game, man.
Yep.
Tyler says the foam and cover kit for his DRZ was $80. Complete seat for his Beta was $350. Yeah, that's where we're at these days.
Good thing you're made of money, buddy.
Dad says Top Gun shock spring is a must for the KLR. The best $100 you can spend. I have heard that. Yep. Let's see. He also says he has 30,000 miles on his XR6R countershaft with no wear using the 650R sprocket from day one.
Yep. That seems to be a must to run the R style sprocket.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to him about that too. Like, I really didn't like how the R stock sprocket fit the stock 650R shaft. It was kind of a weird deal where the retaining ring wasn't engaged on the splines. You had to turn it to make the bolts work. There's a sprocket out that does away with that for the 650R, but it's enough for the 650L. Kind of funny how that works out. Mr. Dan Farnsworth, hi, Professor Dan. He says, I find myself agreeing with everything that you're saying about how dirt worthy are stock and how they can all be modified to suit your individual needs. The XR would require the least modifications to make a more progressive off-road machine. The KLR the most work. In fact, I would like to add that the KLR may never be able to compete with a heavily modified XR. And of course, it's all dependent on your abilities and riding styles. That's a very good point, Dan.
I agree. That's very in line with our general philosophy on where these three bikes lie.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for those comments. We really appreciate it. Up next, we got some industry news. All right, this one here, I'm super excited about, Trevor. I don't know about you.
Too. I am too.
New KTM 390 Enduro R has been officially revealed. Let's show you guys a picture of this here. Let me pull her up. Where'd she go? There we go. Check this baby out.
18 rear, 21 front by the looks of it. Nice, really fat disc brake up front.
Yeah. WP off-road suspension. Looks to appear to be the same kind of 390 Duke power plant they've used for a long time. but it has a really nice looking, kind of rally fairing on the front with the windshield and
Yep.
the high fender. So yeah, let's go through some of that there.
That's a really good thing to see, come out as at least a teaser.
Mhm.
It's kind of on good authority it will come to market.
Yeah.
I remember we received like a, 690 or whatever, a CC more enduro oriented machine that they completely shuttered
Yeah.
shortly after the spy photos came out.
Yep.
So this happens to look quite similar.
Yeah, tentative plans call for a 2025 model year release, and we'll see what happens here in the future with this. It's super exciting. I think this is kind of KTM's response in a way to this growing like light middleweight adventure bike segment with the CF motos, the Royal Enfield 450s. There's people that want to buy this thing, and the Duke or the 390 Adventure sells well, but the criticism of it is the
17
17
wheels.
inch wheels
Yeah.
and the low suspension. So this I think it kind of really addresses those things.
Regardless of where you stand on the introduction of these Chinese middle and lightweight adventure bikes, at least it forces competition.
Yeah.
It forces some level of innovation from companies like KTM to be able to, I guess showcase what they have that you can't get in a bike that costs 20% less.
Yep. Up next, the rain in Spain stays on the plane. What do we mean
So
by
I'm
that?
told.
So there's been brutal and wet conditions that have really tested the top teams competing at Galicia in Spain at the 2024 ISDE. Nonstop downpours have made each test downright impassable, with over 600 riders trying to vie for a podium spot. So what it's looking out to be right now is France was able to extend its lead over hometown Spain to 4 minutes and 14 seconds. So Spain with Johnny Jari and Stefan Gomez and that crew have kind of separated themselves and been able to come into second place. Team USA has really struggled this year collectively,
Unfortunately.
but they have kind of got their stuff together, and they're sitting in third place right now. But they're actually 8 minutes behind Spain, so they're 12 minutes behind overall. So
ISD
not
is
looking good for
such a
ISD.
cool event.
It is so cool.
Yeah.
But it's going to come down to the wire, and it's going to be between France and Spain. I know they have some better weather forecasted here in the next couple of days. It might make the racing a little more tight, but France looking to go back to back for the first time since 1974. So that's
It'd be pretty
something to
cool.
look forward to.
Even if it's not the US, I mean, it's still still interesting.
It's the Olympics of off-road racing, boys.
Yeah.
Last but certainly not least, Manny 304 makes it 3 in a row at Sea to Sky, the Red Bull Hard Enduro Series. He was able to bring home gold at the Sea to Sky. An early hole shot allowed him to lead the final stage of the race from start to finish. He was dealing with some wrist injuries. He's still kind of coming back from a little bit,
Huh.
but
That
kind of
would
similar.
suck to be in that position.
My personal favorite, Super Mario Ramon, challenged him early on into the race,
Yep.
but a crash in the canyon section destroyed the header pipe on that Sherco and allowed Manny to pull away. He still was able to salvage third place, but there was multiple videos of him coming up, and things sounded like an old IT 200 right around.
There was some of it that happened. It was something in the States that a guy completely hammered his header pipe in, and that bike could have been making more than like 20 horsepower.
Yeah,
And
same thing with
it
Mario.
sounded just sad.
Story of the race, though,
So
belong to the
Manny,
GOAT.
I really like Manny. Like Manny, Billy Bolt, of course, everybody likes Graham Jarvis, but is Graham's reign on this whole Hard Enduro series starting to come to a close?
I'm not sure because he put something together very special here. The silent assassin was able to stay on the lead pack, and he made his move at the last section of the race and was able to get a podium spot in second place.
Very
So
impressive.
that is impressive for someone his age, and I say his age like he's old. He's old for hard enduro standards. It's the best finish of the year so far.
Oh,
Come back on to
his,
second place.
His pure technical ability is a marvel. There might be people that beat him, right? But just I've never seen a guy make a bike look like it levitates, except for maybe Tony Bow, but that's a bike that's half the weight. Graham Graham takes an enduro bike up stuff, and it just looks like it floats.
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
It's good to see him still going out there, still competing hard.
Even after he sustained, a decent knee injury, probably 21, 22, somewhere in there. Bounced right back from it.
Well, that's going to lead us to the last segment of tonight's show, and certainly not least, had to lay her down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to lay her down.
This week's Had to Lay Her Down is all about motorcycle loading fails. Let's let this play out here.
Redo body.
Oh, you all fail. Oh!
Ooh, let's go.
Is a good thing. So we hope you guys don't have any loading fails as the season wraps up. We got a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike. As Trevor mentioned, probably a really cool interview episode here coming up next show. And we want to thank you all for continuing to support us and sitting down and taking an hour out of your evening to hear our useless nonsense. So
Yeah.
thank you guys so much. And Trevor, anything else you want to do the people with tonight?
No, I think we've covered about all the ideas I had. So
Sounds
as
good.
always, thank you guys for your time.
Appreciate you all, and you all have a good evening. We'll see you.